Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
And now some news from the world over. President Donald Trump picked Judge Brett Kavanaugh to be the next justice of the U.S. Supreme Court this week, and as expected, Democratic leaders and liberal interest groups have come out against the nomination. A ferocious confirmation battle is underway. The 53-year-old D.C. Circuit judge comes with a prolific record of judicial restraint. His confirmation could reset the trajectory of American jurisprudence for decades to come, away from the activist Supreme Court that created constitutional rights to abortion and same-sex marriage to something more restrained. Judge Kavanaugh has spent the days since Monday's nomination working the halls of the Senate and meeting with key lawmakers. He's also continued his charity work. On Wednesday, Kavanaugh was spotted serving meals to the homeless outside Catholic Charities in downtown Washington. Before we go to our first guest, here's Brett Kavanaugh accepting his nomination earlier this week.
If confirmed by the Senate, I will keep an open mind in every case, and I will always strive to preserve the Constitution of the United States and the American rule of law.
Joining me now with her analysis of the Kavanaugh nomination, I'm joined by Chief Counsel for the Judicial Crisis Network, CARRIE Severino. CARRIE, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Pleasure to see you again. I want to start with the LA Times. It published a story just this week. Kavanaugh praises Rehnquist, what he called a separation of church and state that is fraudulent. And then they went on to quote Kavanaugh saying, Roe v. Wade is part of the judicial creation of unenumerated rights. Your thought on how important this might be, this old speech, and what does it tell us about Kavanaugh and his perspective on Roe?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is almost anyone the president picked. The line we were hearing even before the nominee was announced is this is the vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. They're trying to peel off some pro-choice Republican votes here. I think the big problem with that argument is really the swing vote at this point is Chief Justice Roberts. And I don't think anyone knows for sure what he would do. He likes to move in incremental fashions. I think they're also overreading what it was really in his speech a commentary on Chief Justice Rehnquist's own jurisprudence and his approach to the law. So it's not surprising that we've seen other places where they're trying to put words in his mouth because they're hoping this will be the hot button issue. But really, this is someone who has a dozen years in the bench, 300 cases, and so why we're digging up, cases or speeches he's talking about another judge, it shows that they can't poke any holes in the things he's actually written as a judge, which actually are widely respected across the political spectrum.
Give me a sense of why Kavanaugh, why now? Given the other three nominees that were supposedly in the running in the final four that President Trump had delineated, why do you think he chose Kavanaugh, who does have such a deep record, like Hardiman? I mean, there are a lot of rulings you can dig through, 300.
Well, the question is that a feature or a bug? I think some people go, oh, no, now he's on the record and things. But actually, one of the things this president has said is he wants someone who isn't just able to talk the talk, but they have illustrated they can walk the walk. And so he's someone who, it's not just talking about, well, I know the president wants to hear someone who's interested in originalism or interested in textualism, and so I know what to say in an interview, for example. He's got 300 opinions showing that he can put it into practice on a whole variety of issues, a whole variety of type of statutes or constitutional provisions he's looking at. And so you can see that he can do it in practice and that he's had the courage on so many different occasions to stand up with a decision he knows is legally right, but he knows he's going to get pushback for.
His Catholicism, Brett Kavanaugh's Catholicism, has taken center stage. I want to play this for you. This from the announcement of his nomination. Watch.
The motto of my Jesuit high school was men for others. I've tried to live that creed. I am part of the vibrant Catholic community in the D.C. area. The members of that community disagree about many things, but we are united by a commitment to serve.
So that's what the judge might say. The Washington Post, they published a piece the other day. A Catholic faces a historical struggle between canon and constitutional law. The Daily Beast, the president is carrying out the agenda of a small, secretive network of extremely conservative Catholic activists in making this appointment. Are you concerned about the way that this is being painted, the faith of this jurist being used against him in this process?
Well, it's discouraging because, of course, we all saw Judge Barrett's confirmation hearings last fall and the shameful anti-Catholic attacks that were launched there. I was hoping the left had learned from that because there was a lot of pushback even from the left saying, we don't go there. As a country, it's unconstitutional to have a religious test for office. But it sounds like people are maybe going back to that same rotten well, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And I don't think that's something the American people wants to have as part of the discussion. Judge Kavanaugh's proud of his faith. He's been active in his parish. He's active in coaching the CYO basketball team and volunteering. That's something we should celebrate. It's not something we should be attacking him for.
Well, even the Religious News Service, I saw a piece the other day, and the piece was Catholic-heavy Supreme Court moves right while church moves left. Almost as if we've reached the limit of Catholics on the court. But Justice Kennedy is a Catholic. I mean, he's replacing a Catholic.
Exactly. The balance of Catholic power on the court, whatever that's supposed to mean, that is not changing. And you know, this shouldn't be about a politics one way or the other. I think, if anything, you should celebrate that there are Catholics on all sorts of, as he said, there's lots of different opinions politically within the Catholic Church.
Do you think we're going to hear Barrett-like questioning from Dianne Feinstein and others in this nominating process?
You may well hear them go back again to those same tired talking points. I hope not, but I think it's unfortunately part of this landscape where now character assassination, distortions of the record, even outright lies and deception are often being launched at these candidates and or these nominees for the Supreme Court on down.
I want to play you something. This is Senator Chuck Schumer reacting to this nomination. And part of this, to put it in context, people should know, Brett Kavanaugh worked for the Bush administration. He worked under Alberto Gonzales. He was also the man who worked in the Ken Starr investigation, the Whitewater investigation, and wrote the Starr report. Watch this.
Judge Kavanaugh's long track record of partisan politics comes with a long paper trail. The pro-hard right Business Heritage Foundation wants only nominees who will side with the big boys against the average person. And in Judge Kavanaugh, they've gotten someone who would do just that. We cannot let it happen.
Your thoughts?
Well, a lot of times you see these scare tactics where they'll go and say, oh, this is the kind of person who votes, you know, fill in the blank, against unions or for corporations or against the little guy, against women's reproductive rights. If you look at the actual cases, that is the question. You'll see he has a long list of ruling in favor of people on both sides of the aisle. I mean, whether it's in favor of the prosecution, sometimes the defendants. It's not because he's looking to try to tally up, okay, I need to balance it out. I've had too many pro-defendant rulings. Now I'm going to. No, it's about looking in each case on the facts and the law before him. And sometimes the laws are going to rule one side and sometimes another. One that I'd like to cite is it was a campaign finance case, and a lot of times the left are the ones screaming about those, saying, well, this is just something trying to pave the way for conservative organizations. He found independent expenditures limitations to violate the First Amendment in the context of Emily's List, a pro-abortion group that was seeing it. For him, it's not about politics; it's about the principle, and that's what we should have in our system of justice across the board. So it is equal protection under the law for all parties.
What do you make of the charge that all of this baggage, he's got so much political baggage and a track record there, that by guilt by association and dredging up the sins of Ken Starr or the Bush administration will be used against Brett Kavanaugh? And was that the smartest political calculation on the part of the administration, knowing all of that, despite the great jurisprudence and the record of the rulings themselves by Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, I think they knew that going in, and they judged that, you know, here's someone who is so stellar, so smart, an articulate writer, a persuasive jurist, that even knowing that the left would go low on some of these things, that it was worth doing it. In some ways, I think those attacks illustrate what a strong candidate Kavanaugh is for this position, because they don't really have anything, even in 300 opinions, 12 years on the bench, that they can point to and say, see, look, he had this horrible ruling here, this clearly didn't follow the law. They're going to guilt by association. It's either guilt by association with Ken Starr or with George Bush or with Donald Trump. They're trying to get him from that angle because on the merits, he's outstanding.
He wrote the suggestions, because there were suggestions to the Congress to impeach Bill Clinton back in the 90s, 98, in the Starr report. Among those, he says that Congress should move to impeach Clinton because of his inability to submit to questioning in a quick fashion with the independent counsel. You know that's going to be thrown at him now, vis-a-vis President Trump and the ongoing Mueller probe. Now, I know Brett Kavanaugh has since moderated and in 2009 said no president should be investigated while he sits in office. Do you think that will be a focus of the scrutiny in these confirmation hearings?
I'm sure they're going to talk about it. They already have. And I think it's interesting to note that the 2009, this is a law review article he wrote, but it's significant, first of all, that he wrote it when Obama was president, right? So this isn't something where he's saying, oh, good, now we've got a Republican in office, let's not do these anymore. No, he wrote it while there was a Democrat in office, so his recommendations would have applied to the Democrat. But it's also important to note that he isn't saying, I think judges should refuse to do this. He's saying, here's what I think Congress should do. Here's the problems I think with the current system. But it's never, and then courts should be the ones to do it. It's Congress has that role. That, I think, is a great indicator that he is not someone who's going to put his own policy preferences. So if he's on the Supreme Court, he's not going to make that law review article law. He's going to say maybe Congress should do that. And if they do it, he'll enforce it.
Are you surprised to read the report in the Washington Post this week that Kavanaugh ran up his credit cards and incurred credit card debt to buy Nats baseball tickets? First of all, why is this a big deal? I mean, it's like asking a Saints fan in New Orleans, did you charge your Saints tickets? It's like a matter of civic duty. Why is that a problem?
I think they're just grasping at straws again. And there's even been a whole Twitter hashtag now created, Brett Kavanaugh scandal, because they have all these things like Brett Kavanaugh once cut the label off of his mattress. Or, Brett Kavanaugh once signed the terms and conditions without actually reading them. It's that kind of level of we're trying to find something. And if all you've got is this guy loves a baseball team that just can't seem to win, I'll take that.
You'll defend him. Yeah. You'll defend him. Finally, before I let you go, Judge Napolitano, Andy Napolitano, this week just wrote a piece that, frankly, was surprising, in that he's disappointed with the Kavanaugh pick. And he says this is the establishment, the swamp in D.C., winning out over Donald Trump. And he's arguing this on civil libertarian grounds. He says that Kavanaugh has no problem with allowing the government to probe into all parts of our lives and deny us our privacy. So your reaction?
What he's referring to, I believe, is a case that Judge Kavanaugh sat on that had to do with some of the investigations, the NSA investigations. He says very clearly in that case, he is bound by Supreme Court precedent. And I thought it was notable that he even said that explicitly. As much as people might disagree with this law, I'm bound by the precedent. So who knows whether he really agrees with it. The good news is that precedent isn't even really law anymore. The Supreme Court just this term had the Carpenter case, which said that the government can't access, for example, your cell phone records from the cell phone towers. So, as a lower court judge, he did the right thing there. I don't know whether he agrees with that underlying precedent, but that's not even the precedent anymore when he's in the Supreme Court.
Now, I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, that your organization, Judicial Crisis Network, spent something like $10 million on the Gorsuch nomination, placing ads, making sure the public was aware of his record. There are Democratic groups committing tens of millions of dollars to opposing Brett Kavanaugh. Are you concerned that this is how we get a Supreme Court justice to the bench these days, that you have to mount a campaign to support them?
It's frustrating that that's the case. When Justice Scalia talked about this, he said, look, it shouldn't be the case that judges have any political valence, because they should just be looking at the law passed by our elected representatives, be they Democrat, Republican, whatever. Unfortunately, we live in a world where many judges do just that, and they are substituting their policy goals. And as long as the court is up there substituting its own view of where the American people should be or is policy-wise for the actual text of the law and the Constitution, then we maybe have to look at the details of what their personal views are, or it becomes a political thing. I think if we could get more judges and justices to step back and limit themselves to the text there, we wouldn't have to have this debate. But as long as they're having it, we feel like we have to be ready to defend the nominee. We saw what happened with Judge Bork when people were blindsided by those attacks. No one was expecting, because that was not a thing before Bork, to attack judges, especially in really a way that I think was very dishonest about his own record.
And again, Ted Kennedy dug up all the Nixon years and used it against him. You were the man who got rid of Archibald Cox. And it was like, you know, and everybody's hair was on fire. And he was finished. And Judge Bork, a great legal mind, denied the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think people weren't ready to. No one thought that the hearings were going to take that turn. I mean, Justice Scalia just a few years before had worked in the Nixon administration, had worked in the Ford administration, and he was confirmed unanimously. So that I feel like is where we took a real sharp turn. I'd love to pull back from that, but as of right now, if they're going to be attacking Kavanaugh, especially with unfair misconstructions of his own record, someone's got to step up to defend him, and that's my job.
You think this will be a bloody, ugly battle, confirmation battle?
I'm afraid it will certainly be a bruising one, but I know that Judge Kavanaugh is someone who is so bright, so smart, and really within the legal academy, within the federal bench, judges on both sides recognize what a stellar jurist is.
I've spoken to some of his interns who now work for Elena Kagan and other people who, you know, he has a great relationship across the aisle, and he's loved him.
So he'll be able to stand his own in these hearings. I am very confident. I know there's people, you know, Akil Reed-Amar, famous law professor, Yale law professor, who is defending him and himself gotten a lot of pushback, even though he's very liberal. But he said, look, this is someone who deserves to be looked at more closely. So we'll all have a chance to watch that during the confirmation hearings, and I think we'll get to learn more about Judge Kavanaugh. And he is so articulate, he'll be able to very adequately defend himself, even against these unfair attacks.
Carrie Severino, thank you as always for being here. Thanks. You can follow Carrie's work at the Judicial Crisis Network. They are at judicialnetwork.com.